this whole thing began with a problem because my problem was social media. And I just couldn't handle it. I find it incredibly difficult to speak into the abyss, not knowing who's listening. It's like standing on a stage and not knowing if there's an audience there. Who's in the audience? It might be millions, it might be my mum. So I think that I find, I'm sure I'm not alone. You know, I think this is a technologically produced social norm of sorts, which people handle really well. I was having a real difficulty with it. And so not only the idea of the audience, but also the mode of address. Because I'm a bit of a social chameleon, and the younger sibling. And I'm different with my mother and my students and my employers and my friends and professional capacities. And I think that, I was finding it incredibly hard to level the idea of just projecting into the unknown my life and to be some sort of totalized, subjectivity, perfectly molded for social media. And then I suddenly realized that I did have an audience. There was a person that I could squarely decide, this is the person I'm talking to. And obviously that was Zuck. And to some extent, we're all talking to Zuck because he is obviously aggregating data, and he is to an extent, the sort of the king in this feudal system of data extraction. So it really began like that, and a friend of mine telling me I looked like Zuckerberg, and I kind of put the two together and realized, that we had something in common, sort of.
Yeah. I think that's maybe one reason why when I first saw the project, I sympathized. Because I think everyone is trying to face struggles with that with social media. Like, who are you supposed to be talking to? Like Facebook now for me is just weird because it's a combination of people I know from every part of my life. And I don't know how to address all of them at once. And so I just kind of don't try to use it anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The end. Go ahead.
Sorry, it cut out for a second.
I think we'll be okay. The animations are sort of new. So when you first started off, you were writing the letters, but you actually weren't tagging him and weren't hashtagging his name, which always sort of struck me as almost this assumption that he could see it no matter what. There was a kind of definite surveillance sort of thing. And then you've kind of moved more towards tagging him and then also doing the animations, which like brings him into it in a different way. And there's a letter where you reference them being the idea that they might be monuments, but they're also a little bit sort of ad hoc, which I think is like intentionally kind of thrown together and like unfinished. There's sort of almost this like scaffolding that's just there to hold an animation of his head. How did you develop those? Like, how did you start thinking about
the little models, the sort of scaffolds, as you put it, they were, well, okay, so to pick up the word monument, clearly we're in a moment when monuments are being toppled, torn down, deconsecrated, or just sort of flatly thrown in rivers. I guess I was thinking quite a lot subsequent to the death of George Floyd, but maybe beforehand. Because that sort of happened once the project had got going. So it's funny, isn't it? You sort of do things, and then the world provides new meanings. I think the idea of the monument kind of started to arise once I'd started making these maquettes, and I realized unconsciously they were sort of monuments. And I started to think, well, what does it mean? Like, it's a really interesting moment when monuments being sort of pulled down, because suddenly art, which is often sort of coexists with life, suddenly becomes kind of squarely like right in the middle of life, political life, and the function of public art becomes, something which is really hotly disputed, and normally the stuff outside hospitals, or playgrounds just doesn't really register on people's sort of horizon. So I think it was a moment like to think about thinking through the monument, and also like the sort of ludicrous gesture. Well, a monument's being taken down. What does it mean to put up a monument to Zuck? because as much as, and that's a sort of fatuous, kind of ridiculous thing to propose, but at the same time, like monuments, if I knew that my life was going to be cast in bronze and put on a plinth, I might behave differently,
Hmm.
hypothetically, if town squares were going to be beholding my great deeds for centuries to
Right.
come. Do you know what I mean? So I was thinking, well, that's quite interesting to propose to Zuck like that. Um, and then of course, public space to some extent, is the internet now, although it's sort of
Hmm.
wholly privatized. But that's kind of like our town square, and so I was thinking, well, what would a monument? What is a public monument? Online. What is that? What is equivalent of
Hmm.
a bronze sculpture? And then to an extent, it's the meme, it's the music video, it's all the stuff that
Hmm.
is incredibly temporary in a sense because the cultural production is so fast. Um, but I think it became like a way of dealing with that idea of a monument, thinking about. And then you were referring to how these little scaffoldings came about. Well,
Hmm.
actually, I made them, for a totally different project. They were made for this project, which is which is all about kind of the sort of absolutely,
Hmm.
well, these are little maquettes for this big project, which is about the sort of neo-imperialist global trade in recycled fashion. And I had these things sitting around, and one day during lockdown, my daughter and I just started sticking pictures of. Oh, so then I had like a box of them here, ready to be sort of clothed, if you like. But then
Hmm.
these are the nudes, if you want. And then we just started sticking some sort of Zucks in them, and then we both decided they were kind of quite nice, and so that's just how it evolved. You need to have stuff sitting around in your studio, I
Hmm.
guess.
Yeah, to kind of just pick up and play with.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, the humor, like I don't know, the way humor works in the project is really interesting to me. Also in the evolution of it, because that I think in the moment of like sticking his head just on these like sort of yeah scaffolding, kind of casual,
Mm,
almost like monstrous body kind of things. Sort of I don't know, for
mm,
me at least takes the humor of the project in a different direction. Like the letters are very sort of self-aware a little bit and like a little there's a lot of humor there, but it's a little drier. And then the music video kind of has this. I was trying to think of how to phrase it, and the phrase maniacal came to mind, and I wasn't quite sure if that was the right word, but I
mm.
looked it up, and it's like this sort of overly excited, like exuberance about something. And I think in some ways that does sort of capture the music video. But I was
Yeah,
sort of curious about how you think about the humor in the work, or like how it's evolved. Like if you were sort of conscious of that evolution, I
yeah.
guess.
It wasn't. Yes. I noticed it was happening. I didn't really sort of re-rationalize it. I think it happened in many different ways. I think um, Netflix put Monty Python's Flying Circus on all of them, 45 episodes. I'd never seen any. I'd seen the films and I'd seen like sketches, but I hadn't seen this wealth. And so I was watching all of that, and that I think fed into my unconscious as this was going on. And Terry Gilliam's just sort of like ludicrous collaging of sort of like appropriated cultural materials, and that's definitely quite maniacal to your point. Um, and I think that like Oshin is the man who sings so I gave Oshin my letters subsequent to you, Blair, commissioning
Hmm.
me to make a performance stroke, something new for this show. And I was thinking about what to do, and I gave Oshin, who I've worked with on another project, all of my letters to Zuck. And then we went into the studio, like virtually online. It was all made like in different places, but you can meet online now and record a song 3 different places. And there was something, and his voice is incredibly, like we talk about like sardonic pop, and his voice is so sort of measured and sort of David Bowie-esque
Hmm.
that there's a sort of collision between that and these kind of like ludicrous like little dancing things. And the more they danced, the more the sort of measuredness of his voice sort of was dialed up that collision. So that just felt like a kind of interesting way to go. But also, I think it's just like, to be honest with you, sorry, my answers are so long, but I
Okay.
think that I wanted to raise the stakes a bit. I was like, I want to get on Zuckerberg's smartphone. What would what would it take to actually do it? People, my daughter's always asking, has he responded? And like people are. I'm like, no, rolling my eyes. But like, go for it. Like, and I think if you want to do that, you've got to play the noisy game of the internet rather than the subtle game of,
Right.
right. So I was just sort of like throwing all of the subtlety into the wind a little.
Yeah, that struck me that the project gets kind of closer and closer to him. Like at first, it started out as these letters, and the images were images you'd taken of traveling in different places, and then it kind of moved to the maquettes, and then his face is there. And now with this, it's like you're putting words, literally your words, into his mouth. Like you're sort of getting closer and closer to him, and then like taking over his body in this way that's more, um, yeah, like more manipulating him as a symbol a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. It's a very weird thing to do, but it's. I mean, I guess the word ventriloquy came up when I was thinking about it, and I realized that it was like the thing that entertainers do at children's birthday parties, doing
Mm-hmm.
that to Zuckerberg. But like a ventriloquist will do it to a small model, a large person doing it to a small thing, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously the reverse, a sort of relatively, albeit a straight white privileged man, doing it to a more powerful straight white privileged man. So a sort of that inhabitation of radical assimilation, but it's like it's all over the internet at the moment. Deep fakes are basically
Mm-hmm.
that. It is the sort of visitation of your spirit into the form of another form of power, and to operate as the more the power becomes, operates on the symbolic, like in the tweet and the meme and Trump's kind of way of working, then the more we can then hack and intervene in that process and sort of assume the guise of the symbolic and of power. And I think, but it's a really old reflex. We've been performing. We've been, like pagan rituals are entirely based around that. Like Halloween, for example, in its pagan sense, was the ritual of dressing up as the monstrous bogeyman in order to rid the village or, place of that bogeyman. So you dress up to become the thing. You assume its guise and its voice and its movements and its costume, and I think that way of working is really old, and it's a way that, like Hal Foster talks about, of it's a sort of cleansing mechanism. If you can envision, make visible the kind of abject and the object of kind of fear, mistrust, and loathing, then you're able to rid your community of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so something in that's a lot of waffle. It's not like we don't know what Zuckerberg looks like, but I think by performing Zuckerberg, we sort of open up what he means to a different sort of set of, like, he's more porous or something,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
something like that.
that idea too of I mean, that makes me think of the idea of the carnival, but in some cases that functioning is like uh, a way that, I don't know, the stress of society gets kind of like worked out so it can be managed in a way.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I don't know, that like interesting line of like how is satire and
yeah,
sort of mockery and those kind of things.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think carnival is such an interesting theme to raise, this sort of medieval 2-day event when the world was turned upside down. um, and all hell would break loose, and that is kind of an important social function. But it was sponsored by the church, if you like, and in the same way, this is a carnival sponsored by Zuckerberg. It operates squarely within his platform, within his terms. So there's always that debate. Well, does that stymie any political effect it might have? Is it just like another way of dancing in the hamster wheel? or couldn't it do anything? And I don't suppose to have any answers to that. I think it's interesting to sort of move against the limits of our own, hamster cage, and see what happens if you kind of really explore what are the codes and the boundaries that limit existence. And weird things happen when you do that you didn't expect. So I'm not suggesting this will get on Zuckerberg's, or this will sort of change the way that Silicon Valley operates. But there is always a sort of level of the unknown really engage with the constructs of power.
Mhm. We had a couple questions. Olivia was asking about the sculptures in the video and if they were the miniatures like you were showing, and that I think they were. That she was imagining them as huge, but maybe because that's the context was presented as a monument. And it was funny for me too. In the Instagram images or in the animations that were on Instagram, they seem like they're more like small miniatures, but somehow in the video, I think maybe I don't know. I knew that they were still from those small sculptural pieces, but they do have this sense of somehow being these large
Yeah.
ones. But
Yeah.
the ones in the video are the same as the images from the animations that are Instagram, right? There's not a
Yeah, that they're exactly the same objects. I think that it's an interesting point that I remember looking at actually a Henry Moore sculpture when I was about sort of 13 at the Tate. And looking at it in a vitrine, and the sort of vitrine is quite. I remember thinking it was like hard. I just had one of those experiences of scale, what it means for a sculpture to sort of lose scale. It was quite a small sculpture, but I think it was a maquette for a big one. And it's weird online space because it's the same. You don't really know what you're looking at. You're just looking at it in HD, and that's the context that it is. And I worked in advertising in my 20s, writing Coke ads and Heineken stuff and all that. And I've dealt a lot in my work with the modes of presentation of objects in via advertising, and often it's this white background, it's this kind of like seamless thing that has no context, and in doing so it makes a thing like a Nike trainer like a monument because it's kind of not in the world anymore. It's sort of hovering, a bit like Duchamp. Duchamp used to kind of suspend objects just from sort of fishing wire, and suddenly they become they have this sort of transcendental status, and that's really a game that advertising plays a lot. And so it's really interesting to hear that there was that sort of experience of scale, because they're tiny little things. And these are a nice man called Kevin downstairs. These are the offcuts from his studio. So I really have Kevin to thank, because he was just chucking all these out. And there's something really nice about working with things that you don't decide oh, I need that shape because I need to make a foot. You just sort of find a sort of bit, and then they all just wangle them together. I like working in that way, provisionally. Yeah.
someone in comments was asking about putting the video on Instagram. We will do that. It just hasn't yet because we need to get the formatting correct. If anyone watching does have questions, please do feel free to post them. This is the best place. You mentioned. Are you still there?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you talked a little bit about how the work has changed over the last few months with everything that was happening. You were mentioning something in relation to the death of George Floyd, and thinking about just the experience of the last few months and everything that's been going on. But like I mentioned, the project's been going on for a while. It's not specific to this moment, but it seems like the situation of lockdown and the other things that have been happening have impacted it. And I don't know, I think for me, the experiences of the last few months have heightened the relevance of, I don't know, it's sort of yeah, heightened the way I think about the project. Maybe just in the sense that we're all, for those of us who have been fortunate enough to be able to stay mostly at home, are sort of more engaged with technology. That's our main way of, in some cases, now communicating. But I don't know, did it change how you were thinking about the project, or like impacted your approach to it?
Yeah, yeah, it did. It did. I think, I mean, I'm 40, Blair. I'm 40, and that's great, actually. It's a solid feeling, but it does mean that I feel like there was a moment where I was feeling like, oh, I'll just let the web do its thing and kind of not worry. And then lockdown happened, and it gave me, as an art, from an artist perspective, I hate the term like as an artist, but from that position, I was suddenly like, what do you do? This is the. It made me really reconsider if this is maybe the way that we are now, more or less, for now anyway, going to communicate with one another. It's so important to take it like really seriously and deal with the materiality of it. And I teach a course at Goldsmiths art school over here with my friend and collaborator Tua van Balen, and it's called Situated Practice, and it looks at what really our practices are all about, which is responding to the given racial, cultural, ethical, socioeconomic dimensions of any given space. And I realized that, like, I was kind of doing that with my letters to Zuckerberg, but I wanted to dial it up a lot more, make it, you know, people were looking at the internet. We're sort of all a bit more, you know, I don't know if we're spending more time on it exactly, but maybe my relationship to it is definitely different. So I think that I wanted to stop, like, I've been writing to Zuckerberg for a couple of years now, but like maybe by just kind of making images that were sort of thematic to the internet rather than importing images from outside it, it almost just deals with the kind of like, you know, lack of oxygen that you know, that the internet is sort of, maybe, you know, it is the context right now, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maura is asking how I translated letters to music. Shall I answer that?
Yeah, yeah, please do. That's actually, I think that's Holly, our director, on her daughter's account. Hi, Holly.
Oh, hi,
But
Holly.
yeah.
Um, oh, and if anyone's joined, by the way, and are confused about timing, then that is because I can't do maths. And so there's going to be another screening in 15 minutes for the British or European audience. I got the time difference wrong, so apologies. So the translation of the letters to music was so Oisin Byrne is an enormously talented musician and artist who I completed recently another. This is the second song that I've made with him and Donal, who's the producer. And I really enjoyed it the first time, and then this invitation came in from Blair to make a commission for this exhibition, and it just seemed like a really nice idea, just to sort of try to sort of look back at that working process, Donal and Oisin and me. And so I gave Donal all my letters, and then we met on. I mean, we really just chatted, you know, pretty much on WhatsApp, and then we met in a recording studio online virtually, and made the song like that. I gave them some references. I was thinking the song wanted to be like, have a sort of techno utopianism about it, but be quite dorky, a bit like the sculptures. And I guess I'm quite interested in that, like, generally in my practice, in this sort of collision between surfaces, between something slick and something that's kind of a bit ragged and a bit shitty. You see the sort of, you know, and so the sculptures were like that, and so the you know, that was the idea for the song, really. And it was kind of a case of, yeah, just trying to. I mean, if you want to make a viral film, it seems like it's got to be a minute long and no more. And and I was quite interested in thinking about what it is to work with viral stuff. But we weren't going to make a minute. We you know, it's a music video, because I think those are some of the most powerful forms, cultural forms being produced at the moment. You know, like Beyonce and Jay-Z's Ape Shit video in the Louvre, and Childish Gambino's This Is America. I mean, those are pretty much the most powerful things I've seen in the last 18 months. So I'm just kind of, and my son listens to, he's learning the guitar. And what's his name? That guy, that guitarist, YouTube star. He's had like 3 billion hits, or even more for whatever that big. I can't remember. Sorry for his name, but like that's the sort of context of the world at the moment. So it seems like a really like I don't know like if I'm going to make more music videos, but it's an interesting formal, right? Yeah, and advertising, which I have some experience with, is always aping the music video. So for a good reason, obviously.